The only thing that I think is strange is that he's already having to plead for patience.
Yeah, 80
so
days in.
early.
Well, what do you make of that?
I have to say, we knew things were bad. What we hadn't expected were the in-year problems, the £22 billion. The OBR did not know about it. We did. I wish we had known.
Nicola, you've put the Chancellor on notice. You're not happy with your 5.5% pay rise. Where's that going to end?
Our nurses have said, do you know what? It is not enough of a pay rise to significantly sort out nursing.
You're not going to back down in this fight. Hello and welcome to this special edition of the political forecast from the Labour conference in Liverpool. So Keir Starmer has just delivered his leader's speech and just off to the UN General Assembly in New York. We're trying to solve conflicts around the world. Might actually prove a bit of a relief after the pummelling he's had here over freebie suits and football tickets, dysfunction in number 10 and cutting payments to pensioners. It wasn't how it was meant to be following his thumping victory at the general election just 3 months ago. So did the Prime Minister manage to lift the sense of gloom that was very much of his own making, part intentional, part accidental? I'm joined by the leader of the House of Lords, Baroness Angela Smith, who's also a close friend of Keir Starmer's. Nicola Ranger is the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, who gave Chancellor Rachel Reeves a bloody nose yesterday by rejecting their pay offer midway through her speech. And Robert Shrimsley is the UK Chief Political Commentator and Executive Editor of the Financial Times. Well, welcome to you all. Angela Smith, change begins. Are we any clearer now knowing what that vision is?
Oh, I thought absolutely, and the Hall really liked it, didn't they? I think one of the things we haven't done as well as we could have done in government in what is now 11, 12 weeks we've been in, is say the things that have started already. So we're getting cracking on GB Energy. We're seeing the bill about nationalisation of the railways, that they need it. We've also seen the really important fiscal legislation in place. But what we've also had to do is to say this is how bad things are.
Robert Shrimsley, government of service, but change will be hard. He had that thing about turning up his collar against the storm, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very much him trying to say to the country, my values, you've got to take them too. And so, yes, the government is sort of spinning into the things that Keir is better at. So I can be a man of duty, I can be serious, I can put myself in contrast with populism and easy answers, but also you, the country, you're going to have to do the same thing. If you want more prisons, you might have to have a prison near you. If you want more houses, you might have to have house building near you. So he's also saying to the country, I mean, I would hesitate to call it Kennedy-esque, because that's just not where he is as a speaker. But it was very much, I'm going to ask you what you can do for the country too.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, Nicola Ranger, did he lift your spirits? Because you've sort of been a bit of a party pooper this week, haven't you?
Well, we're certainly not meant to be a party pooper. And actually, I think he came across extremely well. I think it came across as serious, thoughtful. And I think if you were watching at home, I think a sense of there's a plan, even though it's going to be difficult. And I heard, it was good to hear language like service.
I mean, with service, pragmatism, all quite sort of what we know about Keir, that he is a bit of a technocrat. But there was mention of joy, wasn't there?
I'm from the group that think Keir is quite good fun. And he doesn't
always show that often, does he?
He doesn't portray it very often. But he is very serious. And he didn't enjoy opposition. I once thought I was very brave in saying to him, Keir, I think you're going to be a better Prime Minister than you are leader of the opposition. And he said, you know what, you're right. And it's because he wants to do something, to achieve something. In opposition, you make a lot of noise, but you'd actually move things along. So I think you saw a bit of that passion, the joy, that lighter side of Keir, as well as the very serious side of, I want to get things done, I want to change the country.
But, there was also plenty of sort of strife on the horizon, wasn't there? Talk of cuts, an end to Tory austerity, but cuts to benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sense that's almost a hint of, we as people who go to party conferences, we collect these speeches. I thought 2019 was better than 2020, whatever it was. The truth is the waters close over most leaders' speeches very quickly. People either don't clock them in the first place or don't remember them. I don't think you could say this was a speech that in any way changed the dial, changed the mood. And the thing that's going to really matter and set the whole course for this government is Rachel Reeves' budget. That, I think, is the strategic moment. And so we're slightly treading water a little bit till we get that. And so he set a mood, he did a job, and it's moved the story on a little bit from suits. But nonetheless, I think the waters will close over this quite quickly.
With that, because what everyone's been saying is we want to know where Keir wants to go, where is there a vision, what do the missions mean? And I think you got a sense of that today, which
the same high level, we're going to reform, we're going to change our NHS, we're going to... Actually, what people really want, I think, is how.
How. I think that is right, actually. I think there's a period, any grace period, there's a sense of hope. It needs to be different from before. But quite quickly, people will want to know how. You've got a short window of opportunity.
I mean, it was very policy-like, though.
It was.
I don't think it was policy-like. I think policy is about what is the end, what do you deliver? The mechanisms to get there is as important as the policy objective, but I think he was clear where those objectives were today.
Nicola, the cuts, I mean, they're there. He didn't back away from the winter fuel allowance cuts.
Yeah.
You've put the Chancellor on notice. You're not happy with your 5.5% pay rise. Where's that going to end?
What we wanted to do is, we know that pay rise is going to get paid regardless. But actually, our nurses have said, do you know what? It is not enough of a pay rise to significantly sort out nursing. And whatever you want to do, whether it's social care, whether it's NHS, whatever it is, nursing is the bedrock of that. And actually, it isn't enough. We've got a massive recruitment and retention challenge in this country. And they talked about immigration. We're so reliant on international nurses. It's an absolute disgrace to this country. And of the 1 in 5 nurses that are internationally educated, which is amazing to have them, 1 in 5 comes from a red list country.
You're not going to back down in this fight.
We want a proper dialogue. We want proper structural change. Nursing is an amazing job. Brilliant profession. I've spent my entire life in a job I love. But actually, people aren't coming into it, and it's vital. I mean, it has to change.
He's 80 days into government, and he's got battles on every front, hasn't he? Not least from people who should be Labour's friends, the nurses.
Yeah, he has, and that was going to be the case. I mean, I think we're going to see significant investment coming out of the budget, but it's going to be capital projects. It's not going to be the revenue. They're going to hold that where they are. But I think...
And that's going to be funded by borrowing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think almost the argument that he was advancing here, and I do think this speech did advance an argument, was what I call the necessity of incrementalism. Because if you don't believe in easy answers, what you're saying is it's step by step. It's difficult. It's going to be small margins and small gains. And it's a plea to bear with him as he does it. The only thing that I think is strange is that he's already having to plead for patience.
Yeah, 80
so
days in.
early.
Well, what do you make of that?
I have to say, we knew things were bad. And, when we had to deal with the prison situation as well, what we hadn't expected were the in-year problems, the £22 billion. The OBR didn't know anything about it. We did. I wish we had known. We did not know it was there. But if you think about the election campaign, the Conservatives were making all kinds of promises of things they were going to do, while sitting on their desks were the pay review body reports that they hadn't done anything on, and they'd asked them to do that with no affordability criteria. So we've come straight in and had to deal with that in year, and that's what wasn't expected.
Robert?
So I think that no one ever said, and no one expects it to be easy for an incoming Labour government. But what you have to have is your eyes on the prize. If we carry on doing things that are the easy answers, what makes things easy, what sounds good, we're not going to make the fundamental change that Keir was so keen on.
Robert,
that's where these issues become so difficult.
With you, that's why we recognise that.
Yeah.
But there's some structural things we could do.
Yes.
Actually, it's not just about the quick, easy answers. This crisis has not happened overnight.
Yeah.
So it's got to be some structural... Why not...
And you haven't been listened to for so long.
Exactly. And why not become a nurse and your university gets paid after 3 years' service to the NHS? What it would cost and what you'd gain would be huge.
So we're hoping to hear a bit more sort of fresh on the boat.
Well, let's hope tomorrow we start to hear something. We're not strike hungry, but we're nurse hungry for answers, because we believe it's the right thing for the country.
I'll come back to the challenge on the right in a minute, but it was quite striking how he took on the left, talking about the politics of noisy performance not distracting him. He was a lone heckler who was dispatched very quickly. What do you make of that? It was quite Blairite, wasn't it?
The heckle, or the
no, not the heckle. No, the heckle was definitely
the lectures to his own side.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't actually think he was particularly aggressive towards the Labour Party on this. I mean, I thought, although I take your point about some of the easy answer stuff could be addressed to your own side too. I thought he spent more time. That's what I thought. I thought he actually spent more time trying to tickle the tummy of the party quite a bit. The only part I thought really was aimed very strongly and surprisingly so was the extent to which he talked about immigration.
Come back to that in just a minute.
And made
I just want to party of wealth creation. I mean, did that sort of raise your hackles? There was some quite Blairite language in there, wasn't there?
There was, but I think the people listening at home would be encouraged by that, actually.
Right. And
rather than
that was aimed at the middle classes,
it
right?
was, actually. But there is something around. There's such an opportunity for the party at the moment. The country does need hope. And actually, with regard to how you tackle different factions within the party, if you know anything about a crisis, what people want is leadership. And if you've got all different fractions, you've got to have one leader. And I think it was strength today to show that actually we're going to lead, and we're going to lead for all, actually.
Almost Kennedy-esque, says Robert.
I'm of a similar generation to Keir, a couple of years older. And my school, working class kids got music lessons, and you'd be able to have an instrument at school. You'd borrow it, you'd give it back at the end of it, or you could get the other.
It was aspirational, though, wasn't it?
It's aspirational. Working class families are aspirational, not just for academic achievement, but for music and drama and all those things as well.
My own son came back. They did this at my son's primary school, and he came back with a bloody French horn, and it was absolutely appalling.
I think Roy Kennedy actually, within the Lords, it was a bassoon, so his poor parents.
Can I just say something that I think will strike to everybody, though, middle classes, everybody? When he talked about each generation, when he started saying, each parent wants their children to be better off. There are many middle class families and low income families that can't see that.
Yeah.
With the help of mum and dad, for some families, it's very difficult to get on the housing ladder, to get the divisions between those that have family support and those that don't are greater than ever. Because many middle class families think, without me, my child is not going to get some support. And that is key for aspiration.
While we're on this personal section now, I know you know Keir well. What was the point of the Lake District anecdote?
That was hilarious, wasn't it?
It was hilarious.
I hadn't heard that before, because I knew the one where we helped rescue the dog in the Lake District, but I hadn't heard that story before.
Did the trip down memory lane make sense to you, Robert?
I was a bit puzzled by it, I have to say.
It was funny, though, wasn't it?
No.
I thought it was.
I
used to laugh in the hall.
I know it did. I didn't quite get what it was doing in the passage at that point. I mean, all these leaders' speeches have a touch of personal story and a little anecdote, but when I think back again to Tony Blair, coming across the guy washing his Sierra or his Mondeo or whatever it was, there was a political point in that story, and this was just, politicians, you're all rubbish.
No, I think what was the political point was it's actually genuine. It's something that really happened. We have a lot of anecdotes when I'm a bit sceptical about what really happened.
He's had a long life. Hasn't something else happened in it?
Sorry?
He's had a long life.
No, but he was telling the story about the house in the Lake District. I thought he was quite taken that they invited him in. Yeah. And then this funny comment. But it is, I think, a political point to that is people have lost the faith that politics can be a force for good. That by being engaged in politics and trusting politicians, something good can come out of it. We've been through Boris Johnson, been through Liz Truss, we've been through some terrible times, and we've got to show that we can do things differently, that we can change people's lives, we can make lives better. And I think that's part of the message that he was trying to get across in that. Probably didn't do it as well what I would have liked him to, but I thought it was a funny story.
Nicola, you warmed to him?
Listening very carefully because I know, I believe his mother was a nurse, so I was waiting on bated breath for the story to lead on about his mother.
No, he
did. It was there, wasn't it? I'm sure I heard it talk. Our working class today. No, you're right.
So I was desperately listening with that, actually.
Robert, let's come back to immigration, because there was a long section on immigration, clearly aimed at Nigel Farage. Taking back control, a Labour argument. Very interesting line.
Yeah, it was a neat little phrase, that. I mean, I thought it was interesting in two ways about his immigration argument. Was, first of all, he said to people, look, we have to recognise, whatever our instincts as a progressive party, and obviously people who come to a Labour conference are, they're the most Labour of Labour people because you're actually here. And he's saying to them, look, you've got to recognise there are people out there who think differently about immigration, and that we've got to recognise that they're not all racist. And we don't want to hand all these people to Reform or, a much more right-wing Conservative party. We've got to recognise what they're saying, but do it in our way, in a decent way, in a controlled way, in a way that's for the good of the country. Don't hand these people, these voters, to Reform, and I think that's also important because in 90 seats up and down the country, Reform are now in second place. And, although I think you can exaggerate the threat to Labour from Reform, you have to be serious about it. And what you have to do is defang them and take arguments away from them.
Well, it shows how worried Labour is about Reform and Farage, doesn't it?
It does, actually. And I think, history shows us that whenever life is more difficult, everybody's quality of life goes down. The challenge against someone who doesn't look like you, doesn't believe the same as you, goes up. So there is something around genuinely trying to focus on what makes people's lives better. Prosperity, education, health. It does indirectly also make hostility to other people less.
Well, taking back control being a Labour slogan, it's about bigger government, isn't it? And, recognising the limits of markets.
And it's also about saying governments can make a difference. I think I'd say two things on that. Firstly, I think you're absolutely right. When people are finding life tough, they look for somebody else to blame. And I know from formerly as a constituency MP, when we first got elected, or problems in the health service, someone couldn't get a home. If something wasn't going right for them in the public sector, they would look to say it's immigration or it's this. It didn't come up other times, it came up then. But secondly, do not misunderstand how angry we are about the Rwanda policy and the waste of money for something that was never going to work and was never used.
Well, he hasn't put anything in place, though, has he? There's no solution on immigration.
Actually, no, you're wrong, because if you look, a lot of those staff have moved over to look at removals, and people who are not entitled to stay here have been removed, but also...
Yeah, but he needs to deal with the French, doesn't he, really?
But people are having their claims assessed. What has happened under the Conservatives is that no one was having their claims assessed. Everything was going into Rwanda.
It's allowing the conflation, of, for want of a better word, illegal arrivals with people who come here legally. And, if people who emigrate to this country to do a job or to be students under the rules, under the law. And I think one of the problems is that those two groups have been entangled together now in the discussion of this, and you've actually got to separate them again.
But he sort of made the point a bit about that as well, because often when you've got people wanting visas for skills that are needed in this country, but at the same time we're reducing the funding to create those people who have skills in this country as well.
In appalling substance, we've got issues in, modern day slavery and social care, where people are signing contracts that bind them in for tens of thousands of pounds. We discovered 8 nurses working in a caravan with no heating. Wow. That's the kind of thing that is going on.
Okay,
legal immigration.
Clearly we need to discuss this further, but just to round this off and step back a little bit, we've had this row about freebies going on, rumbling on for probably 10 days now. How you know Keir well. How hurt has he been by all of that?
I would imagine he must be. I haven't spoken to him about it, but I think it's one of those things where, for me, if somebody is offering something, is it transactional? They want something in return. Now, there's nothing you can give Walid Ali in return because he's a member of the House of Lords. He's one of the richest people I think any of us would ever meet. And I have to say, Keir might be a bit embarrassed I say this, but he says he's been not quite as smart as he thinks he should be going into a general election and wanted to smarten him up for the election. And that was it. So, but it's been a distraction. We perhaps weren't as quick to explain that as we should have been.
No, the comms have been terrible on it.
Yeah, but in the overall scheme of things, it's called the public imagination. It's something that I think people aren't happy with. But I think what he was doing today was saying, look, what is the big picture? What are the things that will make a difference to people's lives? And that's what he was trying to get back on a focus. But this was something leading to the election. I wanted my leader to be as smart as he could be during the election, and definitely a lot of the papers said his suit looks better, and now they criticise him for it.
Well, now he's not going to take any clothes, nor is the Chancellor.
Well, I don't think he ever was going to after the election. He was up to the election,
right, okay.
But yeah.
But there's still this thing about tickets and freebies and so on. I mean, why not stop it dead and say any minister has to pay for a ticket to the theatre?
I have to say, not just ministers. If you look across Parliament, all kinds of organisations are always inviting members of Parliament regularly to events, often because they want to have the chance to talk to you about it. If that's to influence behaviour. No, it's not different. I think it's all very much the same. Even if you're going to a concert or you're going to a football match or something, people are wanting to talk to you. I think the one I feel really sorry for Keir on is his beloved Arsenal, where he's got a season ticket, he wants to be in the stands, and he's got to be in a box and gets criticised. That's not where he wants to be.
Pay for that.
Well, if you think the taxpayer should pay for it more than the club should pay for it, I know. I'm not really that worried. I'm not really particularly bothered about who pays for it. I just want my Prime Minister to be safe. And I just recognise that he'd be much happier in the stands.
Yeah,
but I think there's an issue across Parliament.
Right.
It's not just for the Labour Party or the Conservative Party or ministers. It's an issue across Parliament. And I think there are some companies that do it with integrity. Right, we need to talk to you. I prefer to do so over a cup of coffee, personally.
Right, so you don't take freebies? You don't take free theatre tickets?
I don't think I'm offered them, to be honest.
Right, but should that be a thing that ministers or MPs more broadly
I think
should pay for their own
I think
tickets?
it's a matter for Parliament as a whole, not just ministers, about access. So the Ministerial Code at the moment says you have to declare everything. Right. Whether that's enough, I'd have a look at that. But I do think...
Right, have a tighten it up, basically. That's where you tighten up the rules.
I think the most tightest thing you can do is to say, at the moment, you must declare everything. But I think generally the public would like to have a look and just see the amount of invitations, firstly, that are turned down by MPs and others when they're offered things. So I just feel a bit left out at the moment, I have to say.
But have a review and possibly MPs...
Well, they could have a review. To be honest, I think it's a parliamentary issue rather than a government issue.
Robert, how damaging has it been?
I think it's been more damaging than it should have been. It's quite a small thing in itself, mostly. I mean, it's not unusual for political parties to have a sort of clothing budget for their senior people. Normally it's done in sort of a pooled money going to the party, and that's what the Tories normally do. But I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm old enough to remember that, when Marks and Spencer's would open, especially early for Margaret Thatcher, she would go in and get some clothes. So, it's not unusual. But what I do think is you have to match the mood. And the mood of the moment, and indeed the mood of the speech just now, was we've all got to be a bit selfless. We've all got to, we're all got to knuckle down. And that's where this doesn't help. And I think the tickets, in a way, are worse. Because actually, you might need a smart suit to be leading the opposition. You don't actually have to see Taylor Swift.
Nicola, your members aren't getting...
I was just about to say, all of this was going on at the very time that 145,000 nurses said that their pay wasn't enough. It is hard for them to hear when they don't even get so much as a free sandwich and they don't even get paid for their lunch breaks. So even if they don't get it, they don't get paid for it. So I understand, and I know we're not trying to criticise, but actually got to think about the audience that's listening to this.
Right. I mean, you heard it there.
I obviously completely understand that, but I'm saying I think it's a matter for Parliament to look at what's been offered to MPs, but I would look at how regularly MPs and ministers turn down so many invitations as well.
As Robert says, it blew up into a bigger deal than it was, and that was because of Number 10's handling of it. There's this idea that Number 10 is dysfunctional, you've not got the comms strategy right. Do you need... I mean, one cabinet minister suggested to me today that Jonathan Ashworth should be brought in, former MP, as a head of strategy. Do you need someone like that?
What a fantastic idea. I'd have Jonathan in any job in Number 10. I think he's brilliant. I was very sorry he lost his seat. I totally refute that Number 10 is dysfunctional. I think perhaps we didn't get behind this story and talk more about it very early on. And I think we're understanding how others feel about it. But I go to Number 10 quite often. I do not get any sense of it's dysfunctional.
Last thought then, on this sort of Number 10 structure. Do you think Sue Gray's going to keep her job, the Chief of Staff?
I absolutely think she will, and she should, and I am a great admirer of Sue Gray and how she operates.
Final thought, Robert. Is this conference going to be remembered as, the time that Keir Starmer sort of stamped his leadership on the party and showed the country what he's made of?
No, I think the election is when he stamped his leadership on the party and he won. I think the budget's going to be much, much more important. But it's not been a bad conference in the end. I think Rachel Reeves' speech went down all right. This has gone down okay. And I imagine people will hopefully be cheered tomorrow on education and health. But we're not going to look back at this one as a classic.
Nicola, are you going to trouble ahead for him?
It's a sense of hope. And I heard the word hope and I heard the word service. And those two things go hand in hand. So we absolutely support this government in trying to make things better for the public. And that's the key message.
Final word for you. 80 days in, and he's got all these troubles, but there are cranes on the horizon, so it's all okay.
I think there are, but Keir's a man that, in a sense, if there's a storm, he'll walk towards it rather than away from it. And I thought the metaphor you mentioned, Robert, of putting his collar up, he just wants to get on with the job, and it is difficult. We knew it was going to be difficult, perhaps a bit rockier than we thought for a number of reasons, particularly the black hole. But I thought today I got a sense that Keir wanted to show a little bit more of himself to the public what moves him.
Yeah,
what he's
Beethoven and
behind.
Brahms moves him.
I know. It's not my own personal listening, but
I love a bit of Beethoven.
yeah. If I said what I would, I'd never be invited to any concert by anybody. But I'm still into 70s pop, which makes me sound very old and very sad. So if St. Essex concert tickets are around. No, I think he got a much better sense of Keir, a sense of vision, a sense of mission, and a sense of confidence about him in government.
Angela Smith, Nicola Ranger, Robert Shrimsley, thank you all very much. Well, that is it for this edition of the Political Forecast. We'll be at the Conservative Party conference next week. But for now, goodbye.